Dr. Noah Emerson had no idea that one stormy evening would change everything. His decision to take shelter at an isolated ranch during a violent thunderstorm would lead to the discovery of a microscopic fungus that would not only revolutionize modern medicine but also save his faltering career in ways he could never have imagined. As he stood there holding the soil sample in his trembling hands, he had no idea that this moment would unravel a hidden secret that had been protecting the animals of Willow Creek Ranch for over 70 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The prestigious Rosemont Research Institute had once been the crown jewel of biomedical innovation on the East Coast. The gleaming glass and steel complex with its state-of-the-art laboratories had pioneered numerous medical breakthroughs over the decades. Every researcher who passed through its doors carried the weight of that legacy on their shoulders, none more heavily than Dr. Noah Emerson. Noah had inherited his grandfather's passion for microbiology, specifically the study of naturally occurring antibiotics. James Emerson had been one of the Institute's founding members, his work on early antibiotic development earning him international recognition. Noah had grown up listening to his grandfather's stories about the golden age of antibiotic discovery, when researchers were finding new compounds that could fight infection in the most unlikely places. But those days of discovery seemed long gone. For the past decade, Noah had been searching for novel antibiotic compounds in soil samples from around the world. The global crisis of antibiotic resistance had made his work more crucial than ever. But results had been disappointing. His team had screened thousands of samples without finding anything truly groundbreaking. The Institute's board of directors had already sent 3 formal warnings about his department's lack of progress. The latest funding report showed that unless they produced significant results within the next 6 months, his entire research program would be terminated. The thought of being the Emerson who failed to live up to the family legacy kept Noah awake most nights. His research partner, Dr. Eliza Chun, had started taking consulting jobs with pharmaceutical companies to prepare for the seemingly inevitable shutdown. Their lab technicians had begun quietly updating their resumes and applying for positions elsewhere. The strain was visible in the dark circles under everyone's eyes as they went through the motions of work that increasingly felt futile. But Noah refused to give up hope. This research wasn't just his job, it was his life's calling. The looming threat of a post-antibiotic era where common infections could once again become deadly drove him forward, even as others lost faith. The only bright spot in Noah's increasingly desperate days was his old Jeep Cherokee, affectionately named Rusty. The vehicle had been his grandfather's last gift to him before passing away. While most of his colleagues drove newer, more reliable vehicles, Noah still relied on Rusty for his field research trips. The Jeep seemed to have an almost supernatural resilience, continuing to run smoothly despite its advanced age and the punishing conditions Noah often subjected it to during his sample collection expeditions. That's why when Rusty started making unusual noises as Noah drove through the rural backroads of Montana, he paid attention. He was on his way back from collecting soil samples in Glacier National Park, the latest in a long series of expeditions that had yielded interesting but ultimately not groundbreaking results. The storm had come out of nowhere, sheets of rain reducing visibility to mere feet ahead of the windshield. "Come on, old friend," Noah urged gently, patting the dashboard as the engine sputtered. "Just a few more miles to the next town." But Rusty wouldn't cooperate. The engine coughed once, twice, then died completely, leaving Noah stranded on an unfamiliar country road with rain hammering down on the roof. His initial frustration turned to concern as he realized his cell phone showed no service bars. The storm was intensifying, lightning flashing across the darkening sky, illuminating a landscape of rolling pastures and distant mountains. As Noah weighed his limited options, something caught his eye, a wooden sign nearly obscured by overgrown bushes, Willow Creek Ranch -1/2 mile ahead. With night falling and the storm showing no signs of letting up, Noah grabbed his emergency flashlight, locked the Jeep, and began walking toward what he hoped would be shelter. The half-mile felt much longer in the driving rain. By the time Noah spotted the lights of the ranch house, he was soaked to the skin despite his rain jacket. The property appeared well maintained but isolated, a large main house with a wraparound porch, several barns, and extensive pastures stretching into the distance. As he approached, Noah noticed something unusual. Despite the ferocity of the storm, several horses remained in the pastures, seemingly unbothered by the weather. Noah hurried up the steps to the porch and knocked on the front door, hoping whoever owned this place would take pity on a stranded traveler. After a moment, the door opened to reveal an elderly man with weather-beaten features and clear, blue eyes that reflected both wariness and kindness. "My car broke down about half a mile back," Noah explained, having to raise his voice over the sound of the rain. "I don't suppose you have a phone I could use?" The old man studied him for a moment before his expression softened. "Phone lines are likely down with this storm, but you're welcome to come in and wait it out. I'm Henry Morgan. This is Willow Creek Ranch. Noah Emerson." "Thank you, Mr. Morgan. I really appreciate it." "Call me Henry," the old man said, stepping aside to let Noah enter. Everyone does. The interior of the ranch house was warm and inviting, with well-worn furniture that spoke of generations of use. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace, and the walls were decorated with photographs spanning what appeared to be several decades of ranch life. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Let me get you some dry clothes," Henry said, disappearing down a hallway before returning with a flannel shirt and jeans. "These might be a bit large, but they're dry. Bathroom's down the hall if you want to change." When Noah returned in the borrowed clothes, he found Henry in the kitchen preparing coffee. A young man who appeared to be in his early 30s had joined him, their similar features suggesting a family relationship. "This is my grandson Daniel," Henry explained as he handed Noah a steaming mug. "Daniel, this is Dr. Emerson. His car broke down on the county road." "Noah, please," he corrected, extending his hand to Daniel, who shook it firmly. "What kind of doctor?" Daniel asked, curiosity evident in his expression. "Microbiology. I research new antibiotic compounds, specifically from soil bacteria and fungi." Something passed between grandfather and grandson, a look Noah couldn't quite interpret. Henry cleared his throat and changed the subject. "You can stay the night here. No sense trying to get a tow in this weather. Tomorrow morning, Daniel can drive you into town to arrange for your car." "I appreciate the hospitality," Noah said sincerely. "I hope I'm not imposing." "Not at all," Henry replied, though Noah sensed a certain reservation in his tone. "We don't get many visitors out here, but we've never turned away someone in need." As they settled around the kitchen table with their coffee, Noah found himself drawn to the photographs on the walls. One in particular caught his attention, a black and white image of a much younger Henry standing beside an older man in front of the ranch house, which looked much the same as it did now. "That's my father, William Morgan," Henry explained, following Noah's gaze. "He established Willow Creek Ranch in 1952. I took over in the 80s, and now Daniel's learning the ropes to take over when I can't handle it anymore." "It's beautiful land," Noah commented. "How many acres?" "About 5,000 now," Daniel answered. "Mostly grazing pasture for the horses." "I noticed your horses were still out despite the storm," Noah said. "Most ranchers I know would have them in the barns in weather like this." Another look passed between grandfather and grandson. Henry took a slow sip of his coffee before responding. "Willow Creek horses are hardier than most, always have been. There was something in his tone that suggested this was more than just rancher pride, but Noah didn't press the issue. The conversation turned to other topics: the unusual weather patterns this season, the challenges of maintaining a large property, Noah's research work. Henry seemed particularly interested in Noah's background once he learned Noah had grown up on his grandfather's farm in Pennsylvania. "So you understand ranch life then," Henry said, seeming to relax somewhat. "To an extent," Noah admitted. "Though my grandfather's place was nothing like this. Just a small farm with a few animals. But I spent every summer there as a kid, learning about the land." As the evening progressed, Noah noticed several unusual things about his hosts. Despite running what appeared to be a successful ranch, they seemed oddly isolated. There were no calls to check on neighbors after the severe storm, no mention of nearby towns or communities. And both men skillfully deflected questions about their horse breeding program, despite the obvious quality of the animals Noah had glimpsed. When Noah mentioned the increasing problem of antibiotic resistance in his field, Henry abruptly changed the subject. Daniel shot his grandfather a warning glance that Noah pretended not to notice. There was something strange going on at Willow Creek Ranch, something these men were careful not to discuss with an outsider. Later, as Henry showed Noah to a guest room, they passed a small office. Noah caught a glimpse of open ledgers and what appeared to be veterinary records spread across a desk. "Do you have a vet who makes regular visits?" Noah asked conversationally. "Must be challenging keeping all your stock healthy in such a remote location." Henry paused, his hand on the guest room doorknob. For a moment, it seemed he might ignore the question, but then he sighed. "We haven't needed a vet in years," he said finally. "Willow Creek horses don't get sick." Before Noah could ask what he meant, Henry wished him good night and headed back down the hallway, leaving Noah to ponder the strange comment. Don't get sick? Every animal gets sick sometimes. It was a biological inevitability. Unless Noah's researcher mind began turning over possibilities. Isolated population with genetic advantages? Some kind of special preventative care regime? Or was Henry simply exaggerating the hardiness of his stock out of rancher's pride? The storm continued. Through the night, rain lashing against the windows as Noah lay awake in the unfamiliar bed. His thoughts kept returning to Henry's odd statement and the way both men had reacted to learning about his profession. There was a mystery here, and Noah had always been drawn to unsolved puzzles. Morning brought clear skies and a transformed landscape. The rain had left everything looking washed clean, the pastures a vibrant green against the backdrop of distant mountains. Noah found Henry and Daniel already at work in the kitchen, preparing a substantial breakfast. "Hope you're hungry," Henry said by way of greeting. "Daniel's heading into town after breakfast to see about getting your car towed. Thought you might like to see a bit of the ranch while he's gone." Noah accepted gratefully both the breakfast and the offer of a tour. As they ate, he noticed a young woman enter through the back door, bringing with her the scent of fresh air and horses. "This is my granddaughter Lily," Henry introduced her. "She handles most of our breeding program these days." Lily Morgan had the same clear blue eyes as her grandfather, though her sun-streaked brown hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. Her handshake was firm, her appraisal of Noah direct and unabashed. "City boy?" she asked with a hint of a smile. "These days," Noah admitted. "Though I grew up spending summers on my grandfather's farm in Pennsylvania." "He's a microbiologist," Daniel added, with a subtle emphasis that caused Lily's expression to shift. "Interesting," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "What brings you to this part of Montana?" "Soil samples," Noah explained, deciding on honesty. "I'm researching new antibiotic compounds from environmental sources. The diverse ecosystems around Glacier National Park make it a promising collection site." "Any luck?" Henry asked, passing Noah a plate of pancakes. "Nothing groundbreaking," Noah admitted. "Yet." After breakfast, Daniel departed for town in his truck, promising to return with news about Rusty. Henry and Lily invited Noah to join them for morning chores, an offer he accepted eagerly. Despite his current career in a sterile laboratory, Noah had never lost his love for outdoor work. As they walked toward the nearest pasture, Noah took the opportunity to ask about something that had been puzzling him. "Last night, Henry mentioned that your horses don't get sick. That's unusual, isn't it? Even with the best care, most ranches deal with at least occasional health issues." Lily shot her grandfather a quick glance before responding. "We've been lucky with our breeding program. Selected for hardiness over generations." It was a reasonable explanation, but Noah sensed there was more to the story. Before he could press further, they reached the pasture fence, and Noah got his first clear look at the Willow Creek horses in daylight. They were magnificent animals, strong, well-muscled quarter horses with gleaming coats and alert expressions. As Henry called out, several approached the fence, showing none of the wariness Noah would have expected from ranch horses toward a stranger. "They're beautiful," Noah said sincerely. "How many do you have?" "About 120 across the property," Henry answered with evident pride. "We specialize in working ranch horses, animals with intelligence, endurance, and sound health." Noah noticed something as they continued walking the property. The pastures at Willow Creek Ranch had an unusual appearance. While most grazing land he'd seen had a relatively uniform look, these fields showed patches of distinctive vegetation. In particular, he noticed areas where the grass took on a slightly different hue, with what appeared to be some kind of fungal growth mixed in. "Your pastures have an interesting ecology," Noah commented, trying to sound casual. "Is that natural to this region?" Lily and Henry exchanged another of those meaningful looks that Noah was beginning to recognize. "It's unique to Willow Creek," Henry finally said. "Been this way as long as anyone can remember. May I?" Noah asked, gesturing toward a patch of the unusual growth. After a moment's hesitation, Henry nodded. Noah knelt down, examining the vegetation more closely. What he had initially taken for simple fungal growth was something more complex. A symbiotic relationship between the grass and what appeared to be multiple species of fungi. Without proper equipment, he couldn't identify the species, but his researcher's instinct told him this was something unusual. "Do the horses graze on these patches?" he asked, looking up at his hosts. "They seek them out, actually," Lily answered, then seemed to regret her candor. "It's just part of their natural behavior here." Noah stood up, brushing soil from his borrowed jeans. "And you said they never get sick?" "Rarely," Henry corrected, more cautious now. "Much less than other ranches in the area." "That's still remarkable," Noah pressed. "No respiratory issues? No infections after injuries? No parasites?" "We take good care of our animals, Dr. Emerson," Lily said, her tone cooling slightly. "Noah, please," he corrected automatically. "And I don't doubt that. I'm just professionally curious. In my field, when something defies statistical norms, it's worth investigating." The tension was broken by the arrival of Daniel's truck, kicking up dust as it approached along the ranch road. Henry used the interruption to suggest they head back to the house, effectively ending Noah's questions. Daniel brought mixed news. A mechanic could tow Rusty, but it would be at least 3 days before the necessary parts could arrive to fix the fuel pump. The nearest motel was 30 miles away in the small town of Riverton. "You're welcome to stay here until your car's fixed," Henry offered, though Noah detected some reluctance. "No sense paying for a motel when we have the space." "That's incredibly generous," Noah said, genuinely touched by the offer despite sensing the family's reservations. "I'm happy to help with chores to earn my keep." "That won't be necessary," Henry began, but Lily interrupted. "Actually, an extra pair of hands would be helpful. We're short-staffed this week with 2 ranch hands out." Her grandfather gave her a questioning look, which she met with an expression Noah couldn't interpret. Some silent communication passed between them before Henry nodded. "All right then. Noah can help out while he's here, if he's willing." Noah spent the rest of the day assisting with ranch tasks, repairing fences damaged in the storm, helping move a group of horses to a different pasture, and cleaning out one of the smaller barns. The work was physically demanding but satisfying in a way his laboratory research rarely was these days. Throughout it all, he continued to observe the Morgan family and their unusual ranch. The horses truly did seem exceptionally healthy. Not just free from illness, but vibrant in a way that went beyond good breeding and care. Their coats shone with an almost unnatural luster, their eyes were clear and bright, and they moved with fluid energy. Noah had been around enough farm animals in his youth to recognize that these horses were extraordinary. Equally interesting were the dynamics between the family members. Henry clearly held ultimate authority on the ranch, but deferred to Lily on matters related to the horses. Daniel managed the business aspects, often disappearing into the office to make calls or work on accounts. They operated as a well-oiled unit, each with clearly defined responsibilities. That evening, as they ate dinner on the porch to enjoy the cool air after the storm, Noah decided to take a risk. His scientific curiosity had been building all day, and he couldn't contain it any longer. "I think there's something unusual about your pastures," he said directly, looking at Henry. "Something that might explain why your horses are so healthy." The conversation around the table halted abruptly. Henry set down his fork and regarded Noah with a measured gaze. "What makes you say that?" he asked carefully. "The fungal growth patterns are unlike anything I've seen before," Noah explained. "And there's a correlation between where your horses prefer to graze and those specific patches. Given my field of research, I can't help but wonder if there's some naturally occurring compound in your soil that's acting as a prophylactic antibiotic." Daniel shot his grandfather a warning look, but Lily leaned forward, interest evident in her expression. "And if there were?" she asked. "What would that mean?" Noah chose his words carefully, aware he was treading on sensitive ground. "It could be scientifically significant. Antibiotic resistance is one of the greatest medical challenges we're facing. New compounds, especially those with novel mechanisms of action, could literally save millions of lives." Henry was silent for a long moment, studying Noah as if trying to read his intentions. Finally he spoke. "The Morgan family has been on this land for 3 generations, he said slowly. "What you're noticing, it's not something we advertise. Not something we discuss with outsiders." "Grandpa," Lily interjected, "maybe we should—" "Not now, Lily," Henry cut her off, though not unkindly. "Dr. Emerson is our guest for a few days, nothing more." The message was clear. Noah had touched on a family secret, and further questions would not be welcome. The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Noah couldn't stop thinking about what he'd observed. If his suspicions were correct, the unique ecosystem of Willow Creek Ranch might hold the key to a breakthrough his research desperately needed. Later that night, unable to sleep, Noah stepped outside for some fresh air. The sky was clear after the storm, stars spreading across the darkness in a brilliant display impossible to see from the city. As he stood on the porch, admiring the view, he became aware of someone else's presence. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lily asked, emerging from the shadows at the far end of the porch. "Too many thoughts," Noah admitted. "Your ranch is intriguing." Lily leaned against the porch railing, looking out at the moonlit pastures. "You touched a nerve at dinner." "I didn't mean to pry into family business." "Yes, you did," she said, but there was no accusation in her tone. "You're a scientist. Asking questions is what you do." Noah couldn't deny it. "Fair enough. But I'm also a guest in your home, and I overstepped." Lily was silent for a moment, seeming to make a decision. "What if I told you there might be some truth to your theory? That there's something special about our soil? Noah turned to face her fully. I'd say that could be incredibly important, both scientifically and medically. And commercially. I imagine, she added, with a hint of challenge in her voice. Potentially, Noah acknowledged. But that's not my primary interest. My department is about to lose its funding because we haven't found anything promising enough. But more importantly, we're running out of effective antibiotics. If there's something here that could help address that crisis, it matters beyond any commercial consideration. Lily studied him for a long moment, then appeared to reach a decision. Meet me at the South Barn tomorrow morning, before breakfast. Don't mention it to Grandpa or Daniel. Before Noah could ask any questions, she turned and disappeared back into the house, leaving him standing alone under the stars, wondering what secret Willow Creek Ranch had been keeping all these years, and why Lily had decided to share it with him. As the first light of dawn filtered through the guest room window, Noah was already awake and dressed. He slipped out of the house quietly, making his way toward the South Barn as Lily had instructed. The morning air was crisp with the lingering freshness that follows a major storm, and dew sparkled on the grass as he crossed the yard. The South Barn stood slightly apart from the other buildings, smaller and older in appearance. As Noah approached, he saw Lily waiting by the door, a saddlebag over her shoulder and 2 travel mugs in her hands. I brought coffee, she said, handing him one of the mugs. We've got a bit of a ride ahead of us. Where are we going? Noah asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. To show you something that might explain a few things, Lily replied, her expression a mixture of resolution and uncertainty. But first, I need your word that whatever you see stays between us until I say otherwise. Noah hesitated only briefly. You have my word. Lily studied his face for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied. Let's go then. I've got the horses saddled up. Inside the barn, 2 horses stood ready, a chestnut gelding and a dappled gray mar. Lily introduced them as Copper and Storm, explaining that they were among the gentlest horses on the ranch, suitable for a city dweller who might be rusty in the saddle. It's been a while, Noah admitted as he checked the cinch on Copper's saddle, but some skills you don't forget. They rode out just as the sun was crusting the eastern hills, casting long shadows across the pastures. Lily led them away from the main ranch buildings, following a well-worn trail that wound through a series of rolling meadows. Noah noticed they were heading toward an area of the property he hadn't seen during yesterday's tour, a section where the pastures gave way to more rugged terrain with scattered groves of trees. The ranch wasn't always this big, Lily explained as they rode. My great-grandfather William started with just 500 acres. The original property ended at that ridge up ahead. She pointed to a distant line of hills that rose more steeply than the gentle slopes they'd been traversing. How did your family expand the ranch? Noah asked, genuinely interested in the history. Gradually, over decades. But the most significant addition came in 1957, when William bought the abandoned Coleman property that bordered his land to the south. That's where we're heading now. They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the rhythmic hoofbeats of their mounts, and the occasional call of a meadowlark. Noah found himself appreciating not just the beauty of the landscape, but also the quality of the horse beneath him. Copper moved with fluid grace, responsive to the slightest cue. Your horses really are exceptional, he commented. I grew up around farm horses, but these animals are different. Lily smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. They are. And it's not just good breeding, though that's part of it. After about 40 minutes of riding, they approached a small valley nestled between 2 ridges. A clear stream wound through the center, its banks lush with vegetation. As they descended into the valley, Noah noticed the fungal growth patterns he'd observed yesterday were more pronounced here, spreading in concentric rings around certain areas. Lily dismounted near the stream, tethering Storm to a young aspen. Noah followed suit, securing Copper beside her. "This is the heart of it," Lily said, gesturing to the valley around them. "The Coleman place. But when my great-grandfather bought it, it wasn't called that. Before the Coleman family, this land belonged to Dr. Eleanor Shepherd." The name meant nothing to Noah, but he could tell from Lily's tone that it was significant. "Who was she?" he asked. "A microbiologist like you. But she worked in the 1940s, when women in science weren't exactly welcomed with open arms. After the war, she bought this land and established what she called a research retreat. Officially, she was raising horses. Unofficially, she was conducting experiments with soil microbes." Noah's interest sharpened. "What kind of experiments?" Lily led him to a spot near the stream where the fungal growth was particularly dense. Dr. Shepherd was ahead of her time. While Alexander Fleming had discovered penicillin by accident in 1928, she believed there were many more antibiotic compounds waiting to be found in nature, particularly in soil microorganisms. She knelt down and carefully brushed away some of the surface vegetation, revealing a rich, dark soil beneath. She chose this valley specifically because of some unusual properties she'd observed in soil samples collected here. Something about the mineral composition and the unique, microclimate-created conditions for fungal species that didn't grow anywhere else she'd studied. Noah joined her, examining the soil with growing excitement. "And she found something?" "More than something," Lily confirmed. According to her journals, she isolated a fungal strain that produced an antibiotic compound far more potent than the penicillin that was revolutionizing medicine at the time. But before she could publish her findings, something happened. She stood up, brushing soil from her hands. This is where family history and scientific records start to blend. What we know for certain is that in 1952, Dr. Shepherd sold this property to William Morgan, my great-grandfather, for a nominal sum. There was a condition to the sale, that the land would remain intact, the horses would continue to graze here, and the Morgan family would never reveal the unique properties of the soil to outsiders. Why the secrecy? Noah asked, though he was beginning to form his own theories. Lily sighed, looking out across the valley. Dr. Shepherd's notes suggest she'd become disillusioned with how her previous research had been used. She'd worked on a government project during the war, and apparently, her discoveries had been weaponized in ways she never intended. She didn't want that to happen again. She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a weathered leather journal. This is one of her notebooks. My grandfather showed it to me when I took over the breeding program. I think you should read it. Noah accepted the journal with reverent hands, understanding the trust Lily was placing in him. The pages were filled with meticulous notes in a precise, elegant hand, observations on soil samples, fungal cultures, and horse health records. As he read, his excitement grew. Dr. Shepherd had indeed isolated a fungal species that produced an antibiotic compound of remarkable potency. She called it Providencin, Noah murmured, finding the name in the notes. From Providentia, the Roman goddess who could see the future. Keep reading, Lily urged. The later entries detailed how Dr. Shepherd had observed the horses on her property grazing selectively on areas where the fungus grew naturally. Through careful observation and testing, she had determined that the horses were essentially self-medicating, ingesting small amounts of the fungus that then protected them from a wide range of bacterial infections. This is extraordinary, Noah said, looking up from the journal. She was documenting what we now call zoopharmacognosy, animals selecting medicinal plants, but the implications of this fungal species. If her notes are accurate, this antibiotic could be active against bacterial strains that are resistant to our current antibiotics. They're accurate, Lily said with quiet confidence. For 3 generations, our horses have remained remarkably healthy because of what grows in this soil. We've never advertised it or tried to profit from it directly. We just breed exceptional horses that rarely get sick and sell them for premium prices to ranchers who think we're just excellent breeders. Noah's mind was racing with the scientific and medical implications. But this could help address the antibiotic resistance crisis. If this fungal species produces a compound with a novel mechanism of action. That's why I'm showing you this, Lily interrupted. Grandpa believes we should continue as we always have, protecting Dr. Shepard's secret, honoring our family's promise. But Daniel and we've been discussing whether that's still the right choice. People are dying from infections that were once easily treatable. If something on our land could help change that, don't we have a responsibility to share it? Noah carefully closed the journal, understanding the magnitude of what Lily was entrusting to him. This is a significant decision for your family. What are you asking of me exactly? Lily took a deep breath. I want you to take some samples, analyze them in your lab. If Dr. Shepard's Penicillin is as remarkable as her notes suggest, maybe we can find a way to make it available to the world without betraying her concerns about exploitation. Your grandfather would consider this a betrayal of trust, Noah pointed out gently. I know, Lily acknowledged, her expression troubled. That's why I need to be sure it's worth the family conflict. I need to know if this is really as important as I think it is. Noah considered the journal in his hands, the unique ecosystem around them, and the healthy horses back at the ranch. His scientific instinct told him this could indeed be the key breakthrough his research had been seeking, and more importantly, a potential answer to one of medicine's most pressing challenges. I'll help you, he decided, but we do this right. Proper samples, careful analysis, and full transparency with your family before anything goes public. Lily nodded, relief evident in her expression. That's all I'm asking for. The truth. Whatever it is. As they collected soil samples together, carefully storing them in containers Lily had brought for this purpose, Noah realized that his car breaking down during the storm hadn't been mere bad luck. It had been the first step toward a discovery that might change everything, for his career, for the Morgan family, and potentially for the future of medicine itself. What neither of them knew as they worked in that peaceful valley was that, back at the ranch, Henry Morgan had noticed their absence. Standing on the porch with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hand, the old rancher watched the distant figures of his granddaughter and their guest as they emerged from the Coleman Valley, the valley of secrets his family had protected for 3 generations. The storm that had brought Noah Emerson to Willow Creek Ranch had passed, but another kind of storm was gathering on the horizon, one that would test the bonds of family loyalty, the ethics of scientific discovery, and the promise made to a pioneering woman scientist who had chosen secrecy over fame decades ago. The ride back to the ranch was filled with a tense silence, both Noah and Lily lost in their own thoughts about the implications of what they had just done. The soil samples, carefully packed in sterile containers, rested in Noah's saddlebag, like precious cargo. In many ways, they were exactly that, potentially holding the key to a medical breakthrough that could save countless lives. As they crested the final ridge that overlooked the main ranch buildings, Noah spotted a figure. Standing on the porch, Henry Morgan's unmistakable silhouette, watching their approach with arms crossed. Lily noticed too, her posture stiffening slightly. He knows, she said quietly. Grandpa always seems to know when something's happening on the ranch. Do you want me to take the lead? Noah offered, feeling responsible for potentially coming between family members. Lily shook her head, her jaw set with determination. No, this was my decision. I'll handle it. Henry remained on the porch as they approached, his weathered face revealing little of his thoughts. Only when they had dismounted and begun unsaddling the horses did he speak. Coleman Valley, he said, not a question but a statement. You showed him Eleanor's place. Lily met her grandfather's gaze directly. Yes, he needed to see it to understand. That wasn't your decision to make, Lily. Henry's voice was quiet, but carried an undercurrent of disappointment that made Noah wince in sympathy. "Maybe not," Lily acknowledged. "But I made it anyway because it's time, Grandpa. It's been time for years." Henry's attention shifted to Noah, his blue eyes sharp with assessment. "And you, Dr. Emerson? What do you think you understand now?" Noah chose his words carefully, respecting both the family dynamics at play and the scientific significance of what he'd learned. "I think I understand that Dr. Eleanor Shepard discovered something remarkable, a fungal species producing an antibiotic compound, potentially far more potent than anything currently available. And I understand that your family has honored her wish to keep that discovery private, integrating it into your horse breeding program rather than exploiting it commercially." Henry's expression remained impassive, but Noah thought he detected a flicker of surprise at the accuracy of his assessment. "Lily gave you samples," Henry stated flatly. Noah didn't deny it. "Yes, with the intention that I analyze them to confirm Dr. Shepard's findings. Nothing more would happen without your family's full agreement." Henry sighed deeply, suddenly looking every one of his 70-plus years. "Bring the samples. And that journal, Lily. We need to have a family meeting." The atmosphere in the ranch house living room that evening was charged with tension. Daniel had been called in from his work in the office, and now all four of them sat facing each other, Henry in his well-worn leather armchair, Daniel and Lily on the sofa, and Noah perched somewhat uncomfortably on a wooden chair brought in from the dining room. On the coffee table between them lay Dr. Shepard's journal and the containers of soil samples. They seemed innocuous objects to carry such weight of meaning and potential conflict. "Before we begin," Henry said, his voice steady, "I want to make something clear to our guest. Dr. Emerson, what you've stumbled into is not just a scientific curiosity or a potential research breakthrough. It's our family's heritage and our promise to a woman who trusted us with something precious." Noah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I respect that completely, sir." Henry studied him for a moment, then continued. "Lily has broken with family tradition by sharing Eleanor's secret with you. But before I address that, I think it's important you understand the full story, not just the scientific facts, but the human ones." He leaned forward, picking up the journal with a gentleness that spoke of deep respect. "Eleanor Shepard wasn't just a brilliant scientist. She was also my father's cousin, which is how our family came to be involved in all this." This was new information, and Noah saw from Lily's surprised expression that even she hadn't known this detail. Henry continued. "Eleanor had been part of a government research team during World War II, working on antibiotics for wounded soldiers. The story she told my father was that she'd discovered something so powerful the military immediately classified her research and redirected it toward biological weapons development." He shook his head, remembering. She was devastated. She'd wanted to save lives, not create more efficient ways to take them. So she left the program, taking nothing but her own memories and knowledge. She used her savings to buy this land, specifically the Coleman Valley, as it was known then, because she'd identified unique microorganisms in soil samples from this region years earlier. Daniel, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Grandpa, are you saying our great-great-aunt was essentially a government scientist who went rogue?" A ghost of a smile touched Henry's lips. "That's one way of putting it. Eleanor always preferred to say she'd returned to first principles. She established her small ranch as cover for her real work, rediscovering and documenting the antibiotic-producing fungus she'd originally identified, but this time on her own terms." Henry carefully opened the journal to its final pages. "What the journal doesn't say, what Eleanor only told my father verbally, was that she'd been warned never to pursue this research independently. There were powerful interests who believed the compound she'd discovered had military applications too valuable to be used merely as medicine." Noah felt a chill at this revelation. That explains the secrecy. She wasn't just being cautious. She was actively hiding her work. Exactly, Henry confirmed. When her health began to fail in the early 1950s, she knew she needed someone trustworthy to protect what she'd created here. My father, William, had just returned from service in Korea and was looking to start a ranch. She offered him this land, with one condition, that our family would preserve the special ecology of Coleman Valley and never reveal its secret. And the horses? Noah asked, connecting pieces of the story. That was Eleanor's stroke of genius, Henry said with evident admiration. She noticed early on that horses grazing in certain areas of the valley seemed remarkably resistant to disease. Through careful observation, she determined they were selectively eating grass with the fungal growth. She began breeding horses that showed this natural instinct more strongly, creating a lineage of animals that essentially self-medicated. Lily leaned forward. So when we say our breeding program selects for hardiness, we're really selecting for horses that instinctively know which fungal patches to graze. Precisely, Henry nodded. It's allowed us to maintain a living relationship with Eleanor's discovery without attracting attention. Willow Creek horses are known for rarely getting sick, but that's attributed to good breeding and care, not to a revolutionary antibiotic compound in our pastures. Daniel, who had been thoughtfully silent through most of this explanation, finally spoke. The question facing us now isn't about the past, Grandpa. It's about the future. Times have changed since Eleanor made that decision. We're facing a global antibiotic resistance crisis. I'm well aware, Henry replied, his tone sharpening slightly. But a promise is a promise, especially one made to family. Noah had been listening intently, absorbing this remarkable history. Now he cautiously entered the conversation. If I may offer a perspective, I understand honoring Dr. Shepard's wishes. But it's worth considering what her ultimate goal was. From her journal, it seems clear she wanted to help people, to create medicine that saves lives. She chose secrecy because she feared misuse of her discovery in that particular historical context. And you think that context has changed? Henry challenged. In some ways, yes, Noah answered carefully. The Cold War is over. The immediate threat of weaponization for that specific political conflict has passed. But more importantly, we now face a different kind of threat. Bacteria evolving resistance to every antibiotic in our arsenal. If Dr. Shepard's compound works through a novel mechanism, it could literally save millions of lives. Lily seized on this point. That's why I showed Noah the valley, Grandpa. I believe Aunt Eleanor would want her discovery to fulfill its original purpose now that the specific threats she feared have changed. Henry looked unconvinced. And you think modern pharmaceutical companies and governments are more ethical than they were in the 1950s? That profit and military advantage wouldn't still drive decisions about how this compound is used? The question hung in the air, impossible to answer with complete assurance. The room fell silent as each person contemplated the weight of the decision before them. Finally, Daniel spoke. What if we found a middle path? One that honors Eleanor's wishes for ethical use while still making this discovery available to those who need it? All eyes turned to him, and he continued, warming to his idea. Noah's research is funded by the Rosemont Institute, right? Non-profit research organization, not a pharmaceutical company or government agency. Noah nodded. Yes, though we often partner with other organizations for development and clinical trials. What if, Daniel proposed, we allow Noah to analyze the samples and confirm whether this fungus is as significant as we believe? If it is, we create a legal framework that ensures ethical development, perhaps a special foundation that would hold the patents and strictly license them for medical use only. It was a thoughtful suggestion, attempting to bridge the gap between honoring Eleanor's wishes and addressing current medical needs. Noah found himself impressed by Daniel's pragmatic approach. That could work, he acknowledged. The Rosemont Institute has established similar arrangements for other sensitive discoveries. We could ensure transparent development pathways and ethical distribution. Henry remained silent, considering. His gaze moved from the journal to the soil samples, then to each person in the room. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of responsibility. I've been the guardian of Eleanor's legacy for over 40 years. My father entrusted it to me, and I've taken that duty seriously. He paused, seeming to come to a decision. But perhaps guardianship doesn't always mean keeping things exactly as they were. Sometimes it means adapting to new circumstances while honoring the core intention. He turned to Noah. Before I agree to anything, I need to know more about you, Dr. Emerson. Not just your scientific credentials, but your character. Eleanor trusted my father because he was family. You're a stranger who happened to break down during a storm. Noah met the older man's gaze directly. That's completely fair. What would you like to know? For starters, what drives you in your research? Money, recognition, or something else? It was a fundamental question, one that Noah had asked himself many times throughout his career. His answer came without hesitation. My grandfather was a farmer who died from a simple infection that became resistant to treatment. I was 14, and I couldn't understand how in our modern world, with all our medical advances, bacteria could still win that battle. I've spent my career searching for new weapons in that fight, not for glory or patents, but because I believe no one should lose someone they love to an infection we should be able to treat. Henry nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied with the sincerity of this response. And if this discovery proves valuable, what would you personally stand to gain? Professionally, it would certainly secure my department's funding and my position. Noah admitted candidly. I won't pretend there wouldn't be career benefits, but financially? The Rosemont Institute's policy is that researchers share in patent royalties, but with caps and ethical distribution requirements. I wouldn't become wealthy if that's your concern. Daniel leaned forward. What about Dr. Shepard? Would she receive posthumous recognition for her work? Absolutely, Noah confirmed. If her discovery forms the basis of a new antibiotic, she would be credited as the original discoverer. Her scientific legacy would be secured. Henry stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the ranch lands now bathed in the golden light of sunset. For a long moment, he was silent, seemingly communing with the ghosts of the past. When he turned back to the group, his expression had softened. Eleanor was first and foremost a healer. She wanted to save lives. The secrecy was a means to an end, not the end itself. He took a deep breath. I'll agree to preliminary analysis of the samples. But, he held up a hand to forestall any premature celebration. I want legal protections in place before anything goes public. The Morgan family must retain some control over how this discovery is developed and used. The tension in the room eased visibly. Lily smiled at her grandfather, gratitude evident in her expression. Daniel nodded approvingly, already thinking about the practical aspects of such an arrangement. Noah felt a surge of excitement tempered by responsibility. If the fungus was as promising as Dr. Shepard's notes suggested, this could be the breakthrough medical science desperately needed, and he would be at the center of it. Thank you for your trust, Mr. Morgan, he said sincerely. I promise to honor it. Henry nodded once, decisively. Enough heavy discussion for one night. We all have work to do tomorrow. As the impromptu meeting broke up, Noah found himself alone with Lily for a moment in the hallway. Thank you, she said quietly, for helping me convince him. You did. Most of the convincing, Noah replied. I just provided some context. Lily shook her head. You don't understand Grandpa like I do. He agreed partly because he sees something in you that he respects. That doesn't happen often with outsiders. Before Noah could respond, she continued. The storm that brought you here. Sometimes I think things happen for a reason. This discovery was waiting for the right moment, the right person. The sentiment resonated with Noah more than he cared to admit. Scientific rationality had been his guiding principle for so long, but there was something about Willow Creek Ranch that invited a more nuanced perspective on how the world worked. "Get some rest," Lily advised with a small smile. "Tomorrow we start figuring out how to change modern medicine." The next morning brought clear skies and renewed purpose. Over breakfast, they worked out a plan. Noah would use the ranch's surprisingly well-equipped office to begin preliminary analysis of the soil samples. Henry explained that Eleanor had maintained a small laboratory for her own research, and though much of the equipment was outdated, some was still functional. She believed in being self-sufficient. Henry explained as he showed Noah to a room at the back of the house that had been converted into a modest lab space. "Most of this hasn't been used in decades, but Daniel updated some of it a few years ago for our own soil testing. The setup was basic but functional: a decent microscope, some basic culturing equipment, and a small incubator. It wouldn't allow for advanced analysis, but it would let Noah begin characterizing the fungal species while they waited for his Jeep to be repaired." "This is more than I expected," Noah admitted, surveying the equipment with pleasant surprise. "I can definitely get started with this." While Noah began his preliminary work, Lily and Daniel had the more challenging task of reaching out to their lawyer to discuss how they might protect the family's interests if the fungus proved as valuable as they believed. Henry, after some initial reluctance, provided them with additional documentation from Eleanor's time letters, legal papers, and photographs that helped establish the provenance of the discovery. By mid-afternoon, Noah had made significant progress. Under the microscope, he'd identified what appeared to be the fungal species described in Eleanor's notes: distinctive filamentous structures with unique reproductive bodies unlike any common fungal genus he was familiar with. "This could be a novel genus entirely," he told the family when they gathered to hear his initial findings. "From what I can observe with this equipment, it has structural similarities to Penicillium, but with significant differences that might explain its enhance antibiotic properties. Can you confirm if it actually produces an antibiotic compound?" Daniel asked, getting to the heart of the matter. "Not definitively, not here," Noah explained. "For that, I'd need to culture the fungus, extract any compounds it produces, and test them against bacterial samples. That requires equipment the ranch doesn't have. So we've hit a dead end until your car is fixed," Lily concluded, disappointment evident in her voice. "Not necessarily," Noah countered, his scientific mind already formulating alternatives. "There's another approach we could take in the meantime, an observational study of your horses." Henry raised an eyebrow. "What kind of study?" "If the fungus produces an antibiotic that the horses ingest by grazing, there should be measurable effects," Noah explained. "Do you keep health records on your animals?" "Extensive ones," Lily confirmed. "It's part of our breeding program evaluation." "Perfect. We could compare infection rates, recovery times, and general health metrics between your horses and industry standards. It wouldn't prove the mechanism, but it would help establish whether there's a statistically significant effect." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "We have decades of records. Some digitized, some still in paper form. I'd be especially interested in comparing horses raised here from birth versus any you've acquired from outside," Noah added. "If there's a clear health difference that emerges after they begin grazing here, that would support our hypothesis." The family agreed to this approach, and soon Noah found himself in the ranch office surrounded by ledgers, veterinary reports, and breeding records spanning 3 generations of Morgan horses. As he began organizing the data for analysis, he was struck by the meticulous record-keeping, clearly a family tradition that had served them well. What emerged from this preliminary analysis was compelling. Horses born and raised at Willow Creek showed remarkably low rates of bacterial infections, less than 15% of the industry average. Even more tellingly, horses brought to the ranch from elsewhere showed a dramatic drop in infection rates after approximately 3 months of grazing in the special pastures. "These numbers are extraordinary," Noah told the family that evening, spreading his notes across the dining table. "If this were a clinical trial, we'd be announcing a breakthrough. The protective effect is too consistent to be coincidence or just good care." Henry, who had been quietly observant throughout the day, finally spoke. "Eleanor used to tell my father that her horses were proof of her discovery's potential. She called them her living laboratory." "She was absolutely right," Noah confirmed. "These records provide compelling evidence that something in your pastures, almost certainly the fungus, has remarkable protective properties against bacterial infection." Daniel, ever practical, brought the conversation back to next steps. "The mechanic called while you were working. Your Jeep will be ready tomorrow afternoon. What happens then?" It was the question Noah had been pondering all day. His original plan had been to collect soil samples from Glacier National Park and return to the Rosemont Institute to continue his research. Now he had potentially discovered something far more significant, but pursuing it would mean changing course entirely. "With your permission," Noah began carefully, "I'd like to take a small sample of the fungus back to my lab for proper analysis. If the results confirm what we suspect, I'd return immediately to discuss next steps with your family before proceeding further." Henry considered this proposal, his weathered hands resting on the table. "And if we asked you to wait? To give us time to ensure the legal protections are in place before any lab work begins?" It was a fair question and one Noah had anticipated. "I'd respect that decision. This is your family's legacy and Dr. Shepard's. You have every right to control how it moves forward." Henry exchanged glances with Daniel and Lily, some unspoken family communication passing between them. Finally, he nodded. "We've reached out to our lawyer, Jim Blackwell. He specialized in intellectual property related to agricultural and biological discoveries for 30 years. He's driving up from Helena tomorrow to meet with us, and you, if you're willing to stay another day after your Jeep is repaired." "Of course," Noah agreed readily. "I'd welcome the chance to discuss the legal aspects before proceeding." Lily smiled, clearly pleased with this development. "Good. In the meantime, there's something else I think you should see. Something that might help you understand why this legacy is so important to our family." Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared away, Lily led Noah to a room he hadn't entered before, a small study off the main living area. The walls were lined with photographs spanning decades, documenting the history of Willow Creek Ranch and the Morgan family. "This is our family archive," Lily explained, turning on a lamp that cast a warm glow over the room. "Every significant moment, every generation of Morgans has a place here." She guided him to a section of photographs from the 1950s. "There," she said, pointing to a black and white image of an elderly woman standing beside a much younger Henry Morgan. "That's Dr. Eleanor Shepard with Grandpa, taken about a year before she passed away." Noah studied the photograph with interest. Eleanor Shepard stood straight despite her apparent age, her expression serious but with a hint of determination in her eyes. She wore practical ranch clothes rather than anything suggesting her scientific background. "She looks formidable," Noah observed. She was, according to Grandpa, brilliant, stubborn, and fiercely protective of her work. Lily moved to another photograph, this one showing a younger William Morgan with a group of horses in what Noah recognized as Coleman Valley. "This was taken shortly after my great-grandfather took over the ranch. He began implementing Eleanor's breeding recommendations immediately." As they moved through the photographic history, Noah began to appreciate more deeply how intertwined the Morgan family was with Eleanor Shepard's scientific legacy. This wasn't just a secret they'd kept. It was a mission they'd integrated into every aspect of their ranch operations for generations. "Your family didn't just preserve her discovery," Noah said thoughtfully. "You became part of it, evolving. Your entire ranching approach around maintaining the conditions she created. Lily nodded. That's why Grandpa is so cautious. This isn't just about a potential antibiotic. It's about our entire way of life, our family's purpose for 3 generations. Noah understood better now the weight of responsibility Henry felt. Thank you for showing me this. It helps me see the full picture. As they continued examining the photographs, Noah noticed one that showed Eleanor in what appeared to be her laboratory, working with equipment that would have been cutting edge for the 1950s. She was remarkably well equipped. For someone working independently, he commented. Eleanor came from wealth, Lily explained. Family money from the East Coast. It allowed her to pursue her research without institutional support. Another photo caught Noah's eye. Eleanor standing with a small group of people beside what appeared to be a military vehicle. Was this during her government work? Lily looked closer. Yes, I think so. Grandpa mentioned she was part of a special research unit during the war. Those might be her colleagues. Noah studied the faces in the old photograph, wondering about the other scientists who had worked alongside Eleanor, people who had perhaps continued developing the research she had abandoned on ethical grounds. Had any of them shared her concerns? Or had they proceeded with the military applications she had found so troubling? It makes you think about the responsibilities that come with discovery, Noah said quietly. About the choices scientists face when their work has implications beyond what they intended. Lily regarded him thoughtfully. Is that something you've experienced in your own research? Not to this extent, Noah admitted. But every scientist eventually confronts questions about how their work might be used or misused. Most of this hasn't been used in decades, but Daniel updated some of it a few years ago for our own soil testing. The setup was basic but functional. A decent microscope, some basic culturing equipment, and a small incubator. It wouldn't allow for advanced analysis, but it would let Noah begin characterizing the fungal species while they waited for his Jeep to be repaired. This is more than I expected, Noah admitted, surveying the equipment with pleasant surprise. I can definitely get started with this. While Noah began his preliminary work, Lily and Daniel had the more challenging task of reaching out to their lawyer to discuss how they might protect the family's interests if the fungus proved as valuable as they believed. Henry, after some initial reluctance, provided them with additional documentation from Eleanor's time, letters, legal papers, and photographs that helped establish the provenance of the discovery. By mid-afternoon, Noah had made significant progress. Under the microscope, he'd identified what appeared to be the fungal species described in Eleanor's notes, distinctive filamentous structures, with unique reproductive bodies unlike any common fungal genus he was familiar with. This could be a novel genus entirely, he told the family when they gathered to hear his initial findings. From what I can observe with this equipment, it has structural similarities to Penicillin, but with significant differences that might explain its enhanced antibiotic properties. Can you confirm if it actually produces an antibiotic compound? Daniel asked, getting to the heart of the matter. Not definitively, not here, Noah explained. For that, I'd need to culture the fungus, extract any compounds it produces, and test them against bacterial samples. That requires equipment the ranch doesn't have. So we've hit a dead end until your car is fixed, Lily concluded, disappointment evident in her voice. Not necessarily, Noah countered, his scientific mind already formulating alternatives. There's another approach we could take in the meantime, an observational study of your horses. Henry raised an eyebrow. What kind of study? If the fungus produces an antibiotic that the horses ingest by grazing, there should be measurable effects, Noah explained. Do you keep health records on your animals? Extensive ones, Lily confirmed. It's part of our breeding program evaluation. Perfect. We could compare infection rates, recovery times, and general health metrics between your horses and industry standards. It wouldn't prove the mechanism, but it would help establish whether there's a statistically significant effect. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. We have decades of records. Some digitized, some still in paper form. I'd be especially interested in comparing horses raised here from birth versus any you've acquired from outside, Noah added. If there's a clear health difference that emerges after they begin grazing here, that would support our hypothesis. The family agreed to this approach, and soon Noah found himself in the ranch office surrounded by ledgers, veterinary reports, and breeding records spanning 3 generations of Morgan horses. As he began organizing the data for analysis, he was struck by the meticulous record-keeping, clearly a family tradition that had served them well. What emerged from this preliminary analysis was compelling. Horses born and raised at Willow Creek showed remarkably low rates of bacterial infections, less than 15% of the industry average. Even more tellingly, horses brought to the ranch from elsewhere showed a dramatic drop in infection rates after approximately 3 months of grazing in the special pastures. These numbers are extraordinary, Noah told the family that evening, spreading his notes across the dining table. If this were a clinical trial, we'd be announcing a breakthrough. The protective effect is too consistent to be coincidence or just good care. Henry, who had been quietly observant throughout the day, finally spoke. Eleanor used to tell my father that her horses were proof of her discovery's potential. She called them her living laboratory. She was absolutely right, Noah confirmed. These records provide compelling evidence that something in your pastures, almost certainly the fungus, has remarkable protective properties against bacterial infection. Daniel, ever practical, brought the conversation back to next steps. The mechanic called while you were working. Your Jeep will be ready tomorrow afternoon. What happens then? It was the question Noah had been pondering all day. His original plan had been to collect soil samples from Glacier National Park and return to the Rosemont Institute to continue his research. Now he had potentially discovered something far more significant, but pursuing it would mean changing course entirely. With your permission, Noah began carefully. I'd like to take a small sample of the fungus back to my lab for proper analysis. If the results confirm what we suspect, I'd return immediately to discuss next steps with your family before proceeding further. Henry considered this proposal, his weathered hands resting on the table. And if we asked you to wait? To give us time to ensure the legal protections are in place before any lab work begins? It was a fair question, and one Noah had anticipated. I'd respect that decision. This is your family's legacy, and Dr. Shepard's. You have every right to control how it moves forward. Henry exchanged glances with Daniel and Lily, some unspoken family communication passing between them. Finally, he nodded. We've reached out to our lawyer, Jim Blackwell. He specialized in intellectual property related to agricultural and biological discoveries for 30 years. He's driving up from Helena tomorrow to meet with us, and you, if you're willing to stay another day after your Jeep is repaired. Of course, Noah agreed readily. I'd welcome the chance to discuss the legal aspects before proceeding. Lily smiled, clearly pleased with this development. Good. In the meantime, there's something else I think you should see. Something that might help you understand why this legacy is so important to our family. Later that evening, after dinner had been cleared away, Lily led Noah to a room he hadn't entered before, a small study off the main living area. The walls were lined with photographs spanning decades, documenting the history of Willow Creek Ranch and the Morgan family. This is our family archive, Lily explained, turning on a lamp that cast a warm glow over the room. Every significant moment, every generation of Morgans has a place here. She guided him to a section of photographs from the 1950s. There, she said, pointing to a black and white image of an elderly woman standing beside a much younger Henry Morgan. That's Dr. Eleanor Shepard with Grandpa, taken about a year before she passed away. Noah studied the photograph with interest. Eleanor Shepard stood straight, despite her apparent age, her expression serious, but with a hint of determination in her eyes. She wore practical ranch clothes rather than anything suggesting her scientific background. "She looks formidable," Noah observed. She was, according to Grandpa, brilliant, stubborn, and fiercely protective of her work. Lily moved to another photograph, this one showing a younger William Morgan with a group of horses in what Noah recognized as Coleman Valley. "This was taken shortly after my great-grandfather took over the ranch." He began implementing Eleanor's breeding recommendations immediately. As they moved through the photographic history, Noah began to appreciate more deeply how intertwined the Morgan family was with Eleanor Shepard's scientific legacy. This wasn't just a secret they'd kept. It was a mission they'd integrated into every aspect of their ranch operations for generations. "Your family didn't just preserve her discovery," Noah said thoughtfully. "You became part of it, evolving your entire ranching approach around maintaining the conditions she created." Lily nodded. "That's why Grandpa is so cautious. This isn't just about a potential antibiotic. It's about our entire way of life, our family's purpose for 3 generations." Noah understood better now the weight of responsibility Henry felt. "Thank you for showing me this. It helps me see the full picture." As they continued examining the photographs, Noah noticed one that showed Eleanor in what appeared to be her laboratory, working with equipment that would have been cutting edge for the 1950s. She was remarkably well equipped for someone working independently, he commented. "Eleanor came from wealth," Lily explained. "Family money from the East Coast. It allowed her to pursue her research without institutional support." Another photo caught Noah's eye. Eleanor standing with a small group of people beside what appeared to be a military vehicle. Was this during her government work? Lily looked closer. "Yes, I think so. Grandpa mentioned she was part of a special research unit during the war. Those might be her colleagues." Noah studied the faces in the old photograph, wondering about the other scientists who had worked alongside Eleanor, people who had perhaps continued developing the research she had abandoned on ethical grounds. Had any of them shared her concerns? Or had they proceeded with the military applications she had found so troubling? "It makes you think about the responsibilities that come with discovery," Noah said quietly. "About the choices scientists face when their work has implications beyond what they intended." Lily regarded him thoughtfully. "Is that something you've experienced in your own research?" "Not to this extent," Noah admitted. "But every scientist eventually confronts questions about how their work might be used or misused. Usually we tell ourselves that knowledge itself is neutral, that we can't control what others do with our discoveries." "But Eleanor didn't accept that," Lily observed. "No, she didn't. She made a much harder choice to prioritize ethical application over recognition or professional advancement." Noah shook his head in admiration. "That kind of integrity is rare." As they continued through the family archives, Noah found himself increasingly drawn not just to the scientific mystery of the fungus, but to the human story behind it. A brilliant woman scientist who had made a difficult moral choice, and a family who had honored that choice across generations. Tomorrow would bring practical discussions with lawyers about patents and development pathways. But tonight, surrounded by the photographic history of Willow Creek Ranch, Noah was reminded that in the heart of every scientific discovery were people making choices that reflected their deepest values. As he prepared for bed later that night, Noah found himself thinking about his grandfather, the farmer whose death from a resistant infection had set him on his current path. What would he think of Eleanor Shepard's choice? Of the Morgan family's stewardship? Of the decision they now faced together? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. His grandfather would have understood perfectly the value of preserving something precious, while also recognizing when the time had come to share it with a world in need. That balance between protection and purpose between honoring the past and serving the future, seemed to be exactly what they were all seeking now. Outside his window, the Montana night sky blazed with stars, and somewhere in the darkness, the horses of Willow Creek Ranch grazed peacefully on pastures that held a secret poised to emerge into the light, a secret that connected a pioneering woman scientist's vision with humanity's urgent need for new weapons against evolving microbial threats. Tomorrow would bring decisions that could change the course of modern medicine. For tonight, Noah was content to be part of a story that had been unfolding for decades before his chance arrival, a story of science, ethics, and a family's extraordinary commitment to a promise made long ago. Jim Blackwell arrived at Willow Creek Ranch precisely at 10 the next morning, his sleek black sedan looking oddly out of place among the rugged ranch vehicles. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a professional who knew his field inside and out. Henry met him on the porch, the two men exchanging the brief handshake of old acquaintances before Henry led him inside, where the others waited in the living room. After introductions were made, they settled around the large oak dining table, which had been cleared for this important meeting. "So," Jim began, looking at each person in turn, "Henry has briefed me on the basics, but I'd like to hear directly from Dr. Emerson about this discovery and its potential significance." Noah appreciated the attorney's directness. "Based on Dr. Shepard's notes and my preliminary analysis, we're potentially looking at a novel class of antibiotic compound, produced by a fungal species that appears to be unique to this ranch. If our observations are correct, it's significantly more potent than current antibiotics and may work through a mechanism that bypasses existing resistance patterns." "And the medical significance?" Jim prompted. "Potentially revolutionary," Noah replied without hesitation. "We're facing a global crisis of antibiotic resistance. Common infections that were once easily treatable are becoming deadly again. If this compound works as Dr. Shepard documented, it could save countless lives." Jim nodded thoughtfully, making notes on a legal pad. "And commercially? Any new class of antibiotics would be extremely valuable. The pharmaceutical industry has struggled to develop novel antibiotics for decades, focusing instead on modifications to existing classes. A truly new antibiotic with effectiveness against resistant strains would be, well, it's difficult to put a precise number on it, but we're talking billions in potential market value." The attorney whistled softly. "That certainly raises the stakes." He turned to Henry. "And you're concerned about keeping control of how this discovery is developed?" Henry nodded gravely. "Eleanor entrusted this to our family because she feared misuse of her discovery. We need to honor that trust while also considering the good it might do." "I understand," Jim said. "Let me outline some options for protecting your interests." For the next hour, Jim explained various legal frameworks that could maintain the Morgan family's control while allowing for development of the antibiotic. He discussed patents, licensing agreements, and the establishment of a foundation that could oversee ethical development and distribution. "The key," he explained, "is to secure proper intellectual property protection before any public disclosure. Once Dr. Emerson takes samples to his lab, the clock starts ticking. We'd want to file provisional patents immediately." Daniel leaned forward. "And who would control these patents?" "That's the beauty of this approach," Jim replied. "You could establish a foundation, the Shepard Foundation, perhaps, that would hold the patents. The Morgan family would control the foundation's board, giving you final say over how the discovery is developed and licensed." Lily, who had been listening intently, spoke up. "Could we include specific ethical requirements in the licensing agreements? Ensuring affordable access in developing countries, for instance?" "Absolutely," Jim confirmed. "That's increasingly common with important medical discoveries. You could require any commercial partners to commit to equitable global access. As the discussion continued, Noah found himself impressed by how the Morgan family approached this opportunity. Rather than focusing primarily on potential profits, their concern centered on ethical use and honoring Eleanor's legacy. It reinforced his growing respect for this remarkable family. By lunchtime, they had outlined a preliminary plan. Noah would take samples back to the Rosemont Institute for proper analysis. Simultaneously, Jim would prepare the necessary legal documents to protect the Morgan family's interests. If the analysis confirmed the fungus's antibiotic properties, they would establish the Shepherd Foundation to oversee development. "There's one more thing I should mention," Noah said as they wrapped up the morning's discussion. "The analysis process at Rosemont wouldn't be entirely private. I have a small research team who would need to be involved." Henry frowned slightly. "How many people?" "Just two others, Dr. Eliza Chun, my research partner, and Marcus Webb, our lab technician. Both are absolutely trustworthy and bound by strict confidentiality agreements with the Institute." After a moment's consideration, Henry nodded. "All right. But they need to understand the sensitivity of this work." "They will," Noah assured him. As they broke for lunch, Jim took Henry aside for a private conversation, while Daniel headed to the office to check on ranch business. This left Noah and Lily alone on the porch, looking out over the sprawling pastures where horses grazed peacefully, unaware of their role in this unfolding story. "How are you feeling about all this?" Noah asked, noticing Lily's thoughtful expression. She considered the question before answering. "Relieved, mostly. This secret has been a burden, especially in recent years as the antibiotic resistance crisis has grown. It felt wrong to be sitting on something that could help, but I also understood Grandpa's commitment to Eleanor's wishes. It's a remarkable legacy your family has preserved," Noah said sincerely. Lily smiled. "And now you're part of it too. Strange how life works, isn't it? If your Jeep hadn't broken down in that specific spot during that specific storm." "I don't usually believe in fate," Noah admitted, "but I have to say the timing seems almost designed. Eleanor used to tell my grandfather that science reveals the patterns in seemingly random events. Maybe this is one of those patterns." Before Noah could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. Looking down the drive, they saw a tow truck with Noah's Jeep hitched behind it. "Looks like Rusty's back," Lily observed. "Perfect timing," Noah said, feeling a curious mix of emotions. Part of him was eager to get back to his lab and begin proper analysis of the samples. Another part was reluctant to leave Willow Creek Ranch and the extraordinary people he'd met here. The mechanic, a cheerful man named Mike, unloaded the Jeep and explained the repairs he'd made. "Fuel pump was shot, but she's running good as new now." "Well, as good as something this old can run," he added with a grin. After Mike departed, Noah turned to Lily. "I guess I'll be heading out tomorrow morning." "So soon?" she asked, a hint of disappointment in her voice. "The sooner I get these samples analyzed, the sooner we'll know what we're dealing with," Noah explained. "Besides, my team at Rosemont is probably wondering what happened to me." Lily nodded in understanding. "Of course, science waits for no one, right?" That evening, the Morgan family hosted a special dinner for Noah's last night at the ranch. Henry even brought up a bottle of rare bourbon he'd been saving for a significant occasion. "This feels appropriate," he said as he poured. Small glasses for each of them. Whatever comes next, something important began here this week. They raised their glasses in a toast. "To Eleanor," Henry said solemnly. "May we honor her discovery in ways that would make her proud." "To Eleanor," the others echoed. As the evening progressed, the conversation flowed more easily than it had all week. With the major decisions made and plans in place, a weight seemed to have lifted from everyone's shoulders. Henry even shared stories about Eleanor that he'd never told Lily and Daniel before, glimpses of the brilliant, determined woman who had entrusted her life's work to their family. She wasn't an easy person, Henry recalled with a fond smile. Brilliant, yes, but stubborn as a mule and absolutely uncompromising when it came to her principles. My father used to say she could stare down a charging bull without blinking. Sounds like someone else I know, Daniel commented with a meaningful glance at his grandfather, earning chuckles from around the table. Later, as the evening wound down, Henry asked Noah to join him for a brief walk. They strolled toward the horse pasture, the full moon illuminating the landscape in silver light. I want you to understand something, Dr. Emerson, Henry said after they had walked in silence. For a while, I'm trusting you not just with scientific samples, but with a legacy that's defined our family for generations. I understand that, sir, Noah replied solemnly. And I promise to honor that trust. Henry nodded, seemingly satisfied. I believe you will. There's something about you that reminds me of Eleanor, that same intensity of purpose, that same core of integrity. Coming from Henry, Noah recognized this as high praise indeed. Thank you. That means a great deal to me. There's something else you should know, Henry continued, his voice taking on a note of caution. Eleanor had enemies, powerful people who wanted her research for purposes she couldn't accept. She believed she'd hidden her tracks well, but she always warned my father to be vigilant. Noah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Do you think that's still relevant today? After all this time, I don't know, Henry admitted. But secrets have a way of attracting attention, especially valuable ones. Once you begin your analysis, be careful about who knows what you're working on. I will, Noah promised, taking the warning seriously. We'll keep the circle of knowledge as small as possible. As they turned back toward the house, Henry added one final thought. Eleanor used to say that the most dangerous force in the world isn't evil, it's indifference. Good people who look away when difficult choices need to be made. She chose not to look away. Neither did my father, or I now that choice passes. To a new generation, to Lily, to Daniel. And in a way, to you as well. Noah felt the weight of those words, understanding that he was being included in something profound, a chain of ethical commitment that stretched back decades. I won't look away, he said simply. The next morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect Montana autumn day. Noah packed his few belongings and the carefully secured soil samples into Rusty, feeling a strange reluctance to leave despite his eagerness to begin the scientific analysis. The Morgan family gathered on the porch to see him off. Daniel handed him a sealed envelope. The legal documents Jim prepared, he explained. Confidentiality agreements, preliminary patent application forms, and contact information. Everything we discussed yesterday. Thank you, Noah said, tucking the envelope carefully into his bag. I'll be in touch as soon as I have preliminary results from the lab. Lily stepped forward next. I put together some additional notes from Eleanor's journals that might help with your analysis. And she hesitated briefly. I included my personal contact information, in case you have questions that can't wait for official channels. Noah accepted the notebook she offered, noticing the slight flush in her cheeks. That will be very helpful. Thank you. Finally, Henry approached, extending his hand. Safe travels, Dr. Emerson. Remember what we discussed. I will, Noah assured him, shaking the older man's hand firmly. As he drove away from Willow Creek Ranch, watching the figures on the porch grow smaller in his rearview mirror, Noah felt that he was leaving with far more than soil samples. He had become part of a story much larger than himself, a story of scientific discovery, ethical choice, and unexpected connection. The drive back to Boston would take several days. Noah planned to stop overnight in Minneapolis to break up the journey, using the time to organize his thoughts and plan the analysis protocol. The samples, securely packaged in specialized containers to maintain their integrity, represented a potential breakthrough not just for his research career, but for global health. As miles of Montana landscape passed by, Noah found his thoughts continually returning to the Morgan family and their remarkable stewardship of Eleanor Shepard's legacy. Most people, upon discovering something of such potential value on their property, would have immediately sought to capitalize on it. The Morgans had instead honored a promise made generations ago, protecting both the discovery itself and the ethical principles that had guided its concealment. By early evening, Noah had crossed into North Dakota. Finding a decent hotel in Bismarck, he checked in and immediately called his research partner, Eliza Chun. "Noah," she exclaimed when she heard his voice. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." "It's a long story," he replied, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "But Eliza, I think I found something incredible." "What kind of something?" she asked, her scientific curiosity immediately engaged. "I can't discuss it over the phone," Noah said, remembering Henry's warning about discretion. "But I'm heading back now. I should be there in 3 days. Can you clear our schedule for immediate analysis of some samples I'm bringing?" "That sounds serious," Eliza commented, her tone growing more professional. "Should I bring Marcus in on this?" "Yes, but no one else. This needs to stay between the 3 of us for now." "Now you've really got me intrigued," she said. "But yes, I'll clear our schedule and make sure the lab is ready." After ending the call, Noah spread out Lily's additional notes on the hotel desk. The material provided fascinating context for Eleanor Shepard's work, details about her research methodology, observations about which horses seemed most drawn to the fungal patches, and speculations about the biochemical mechanisms that might explain the antibiotic's effectiveness. One passage particularly caught his attention. The compound appears to target bacterial cell walls in a manner distinct from beta-lactam antibiotics. Even after repeated exposure, test cultures show no signs of developing resistance mechanisms. This suggests a fundamental vulnerability in bacterial structure that cannot be easily overcome through adaptive mutation. If true, this observation alone would make Providence revolutionary. One of the greatest challenges in antibiotic development was bacteria's remarkable ability to evolve resistance. A compound that targeted a fundamental vulnerability could potentially remain effective far longer than conventional antibiotics. Noah worked late into the night, organizing the information and planning the analysis protocols they would implement upon his return. He was so engrossed that he barely noticed the hours passing, only stopping when exhaustion finally overtook his excitement. As he drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with images of Coleman Valley, of horses grazing on fungal-rich pastures, and of a determined woman scientist who had chosen principles over recognition decades before he was born. The next morning, Noah continued his journey eastward. The miles passed more quickly than expected, his mind occupied with scientific possibilities and the remarkable story he had stumbled into. By pushing his driving hours, he managed to reach Chicago by the second evening, deciding to make one final push to Boston the following day rather than stopping in Minneapolis as originally planned. He called Lily that night from his hotel room, partly to update her on his progress, and partly because he found himself wanting to hear her voice. "The samples are still secure," he assured her, "and I've been studying the additional notes you provided. They're incredibly helpful." "I'm glad," Lily replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "How's Rusty holding up to the journey?" "Surprisingly well. Your local mechanic did a great job with the repairs." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on ranch happenings. A new foal had been born that morning, and Noah's travel observations. Before ending the call, Lily added something that stuck with Noah. "Grandpa said something interesting after you left," she told him. "He said meeting you made him believe in the concept of the right person at the right time. That's quite a statement from someone as naturally skeptical as my grandfather." The words warmed Noah unexpectedly. That means a lot, coming from him. I feel the same way about meeting your family. Something about this whole sequence of events feels, I don't know, meant to happen. For a scientist, that's quite an unscientific observation, Lily teased gently. Noah laughed. True enough. Let's call it statistically improbable, but fortuitous. After they said their goodbyes, Noah found himself thinking about the concept of right timing, how his car breaking down during that specific storm had led him to a discovery that might never have emerged otherwise. For someone dedicated to rational scientific thinking, the coincidence seemed almost too perfect to be purely random. The final day of driving was long but energizing. As familiar East Coast landscapes replaced the Midwestern plains, Noah's anticipation grew. By late evening, he finally pulled into the parking garage of his apartment building in Cambridge, tired, but exhilarated to have completed the journey with the precious samples intact. After securing the samples in his home refrigerator overnight, a less than ideal but temporary solution, Noah fell into a deep, exhausted sleep. Tomorrow would begin the next chapter of this extraordinary story, the scientific validation of Eleanor Shepard's discovery. The Rosemont Research Institute looked exactly as Noah had left it, a gleaming complex of glass and steel that housed some of the most advanced biomedical research facilities on the East Coast. Yet somehow it felt different to him now, as if his experiences at Willow Creek Ranch had shifted his perspective in subtle but meaningful ways. Eliza was waiting for him in their shared office, practically bouncing with curiosity. A petite woman, with keen intelligence reflected in her dark eyes. She had been Noah's research partner for 5 years, their complementary skills making them a formidable scientific team. "Finally," she exclaimed as he entered. "I've been dying to know what was so important that you've been mysteriously calling from the road. Marcus is setting up the lab now." "Where's Director Phillips?" Noah asked, referring to the head of their research division. "At a conference in Geneva all week." "Why? Do you want him involved in whatever this is?" Noah shook his head. "No, that's perfect actually. The fewer people who know about this initially, the better." Eliza's eyebrows rose. "Now you're really making me curious. What exactly did you find in Montana?" "Not here," Noah said, glancing toward the open office door. "Let's go to the secure lab. I'll explain everything there." The secure laboratory was a specialized space designed for work with potentially sensitive materials, biohazards, proprietary compounds, or in this case, a discovery that required discretion for both scientific and legal reasons. Marcus Webb, their skilled lab technician, was already there, calibrating equipment for whatever analysis Noah might require. After closing the door and ensuring privacy, Noah carefully removed the soil samples from his carrying case. "These," he said simply, "might contain the most significant antibiotic discovery since penicillin." Over the next hour, Noah explained everything: his chance encounter with the Morgan family, the unique ecology of Coleman Valley, Eleanor Shepard's remarkable research, and the historical circumstances that had led to the discovery remaining hidden for decades. Eliza and Marcus listened with increasing amazement. As scientists accustomed to methodical progress and incremental advances, the idea of stumbling upon a potentially revolutionary compound preserved on a remote ranch seemed almost fantastical. "This sounds like something from a movie," Marcus commented when Noah finished his explanation. "A brilliant woman scientist hides her discovery on a ranch, and 70 years later, you just happen to break down nearby during a storm." "I know how it sounds," Noah acknowledged. "But the preliminary evidence is compelling. The horse health records alone show statistically significant protection against bacterial infection. And Dr. Shepard's notes are meticulous." Eliza, ever the pragmatist, was already focusing on next steps. "We need to isolate the fungus, culture it, extract any compounds it produces, and test them against a panel of bacterial strains, including resistant ones." "Exactly," Noah agreed. And we need to do it under strict confidentiality. The Morgan family has entrusted us with something they've protected for generations. We can't betray that trust. Of course not, Eliza assured him. But Noah, if this is what you think it is, this could change everything. For medicine, for our department's funding situation, for your career, for millions of people who might otherwise die from resistant infections, Noah added quietly. That's what matters most. They immediately began the painstaking process of analyzing the soil samples. First, they needed to isolate the fungal species Eleanor had identified as the antibiotic producer. Using her notes as a guide, they prepared appropriate growth media and began the culturing process. This morphology is unlike anything I've seen before, Marcus commented as they examined the first fungal cultures under the microscope. It has structural similarities to Penicillium, but the reproductive structures are completely different. It could be an entirely novel genus, Eliza suggested, excitement evident in her voice. That alone would be a significant discovery. Days passed in a blur of intense work. Noah, Eliza, and Marcus worked long hours, sometimes staying in the lab until midnight. They maintained absolute secrecy about their research, telling curious colleagues only that they were following up on some interesting soil samples from Montana. By the end of the first week, they had successfully isolated and cultured the fungal species. The next step was to extract any compounds it produced and test them for antibiotic activity. The extraction process will take at least 48 hours, Eliza explained as they set up the necessary equipment. Then we can begin antimicrobial assays against our test panel of bacterial strains. Noah nodded, trying to contain his impatience. Science couldn't be rushed, especially when the potential stakes were this high. Every step needed to be methodical, documented, and verified. He called Lily that evening to update her on their progress. These calls had become a daily occurrence, ostensibly to keep the Morgan family informed. But Noah had to admit to himself that he looked forward to hearing Lily's voice each day. "We've isolated the fungus," he told her. "It appears to be a novel species, possibly even a new genus. That alone is scientifically significant. And the antibiotic properties?" Lily asked, the question they were both most interested in. "We'll begin testing tomorrow or the next day. The extraction process takes time." "Grandpa's been asking about your progress," Lily mentioned. "I think he's more invested in this than he wants to admit." Noah smiled at that. "How is everyone?" "There? Good. Busy with fall preparations. Daniel's negotiating a new contract for our breeding stock. And I've been thinking a lot about what happens next, if the tests confirm what we believe." "Me too," Noah admitted. "This could change so many things." The conversation drifted to more personal topics: Lily's day on the ranch, Noah's readjustment to city life after his time in Montana. When they finally said goodnight, Noah found himself standing at his apartment window, looking out at the Cambridge skyline and feeling an unexpected longing for the open spaces and clear night skies of Willow Creek Ranch. The next day brought a significant milestone. The extraction process had yielded a crude extract from the fungal cultures, a yellowish liquid that, if Eleanor's notes were correct, should contain the compound she had named Providencin. "Ready for the moment of truth?" Eliza asked as they prepared the antimicrobial assay plates. The test was relatively simple in concept. They would apply the extract to culture plates, inoculated with various bacterial species, including several antibiotic-resistant strains that represented major public health threats. If the extract inhibited bacterial growth, it would create visible zones of inhibition, clear areas where bacteria couldn't grow. "Let's start with Staphylococcus aureus," Noah suggested. Both the standard strain and the methicillin-resistant variant. They carefully prepared the plates, applied standardized amounts of the extract alongside control antibiotics, and placed them in the incubator. Now came the hardest part: waiting for results. 24 hours minimum, Marcus reminded them. seeing their impatience, possibly longer for some of the slower-growing strains. It was the longest 24 hours of Noah's scientific career. He tried to occupy himself with paperwork and literature review, but his thoughts kept returning to the incubating plates and their potential significance. When the time finally came to examine the results, the three researchers gathered around the lab bench with an almost ceremonial solemnity. Marcus carefully removed the first set of plates from the incubator and placed them on the viewing table. The moment Noah saw the plates, he knew. The zones of inhibition around the extract samples were enormous, far larger than those created by the control antibiotics, indicating vastly superior antimicrobial activity. "My God," Eliza whispered, staring at the plates. "Look at the MRSA. Plate. Nothing should clear a zone that large with resistant staph." It was true. The methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, one of the most problematic, antibiotic-resistant pathogens in modern hospitals, had been completely inhibited by the fungal extract. "Check the other plates," Noah urged, his heart racing. One by one, Marcus brought out the remaining test plates. The results were consistent across all bacterial strains tested, unprecedented zones of inhibition, indicating extraordinary antibiotic potency. This is revolutionary," Eliza said, her scientific reserve cracking in the face of such dramatic results. "If these preliminary results hold up under more rigorous testing." "Eleanor was right," Noah said quietly, a profound sense of vindication washing over him. All these years, the Morgan family was protecting something truly extraordinary. Marcus, always practical, was already documenting the results with photographs and measurements. "We need to run quantitative assays to determine minimum inhibitory concentrations. And we'll need to fractionate the extract to isolate the active compound. And toxicity testing," Eliza added. "We need to know if it's safe for mammalian cells." Noah nodded, his mind already racing ahead to next steps. "We'll do all of that. But first, I need to call the Morgans. They've been waiting 70 years to know if Eleanor's discovery was as significant as she believed. They deserve to hear this immediately." As he stepped away to make the call, Noah felt a strange mixture of scientific exhilaration and humbling responsibility. What had begun with a broken-down Jeep during a Montana thunderstorm had led to potentially one of the most significant medical discoveries of the century, a discovery that might save countless lives in the ongoing battle against antibiotic resistance. The phone rang several times before Lily answered. When Noah told her the news, her response was a moment of stunned silence, followed by an exclamation of joy that made him wish he could see her face in that moment. "I knew it," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Eleanor was right all along. Wait until I tell Grandpa." Noah could hear the sound of her running, presumably to find Henry, and then muffled voices as she shared the news. When Henry came on the line, his usually stoic voice carried an unmistakable note of vindication. "So she was right," he said simply. "After all these years." "She was right," Noah confirmed. "And your family's protection of her discovery may have preserved something that could change the course of modern medicine. You should be incredibly proud, Mr. Morgan." "Not pride," Henry corrected gently. "Just satisfaction in a promise kept. Eleanor would be pleased, not that her science was validated. She never doubted that, but that the right person finally found it. Someone who understands its value beyond dollars and cents." As Noah ended the call with promises to send detailed results and continue updating them, he realized that this discovery had become far more than a scientific breakthrough or career achievement. It had become a bridge between past and present, between a pioneering woman scientist's ethical stand and modern medicine's desperate need for new weapons against evolving pathogens. The path forward would not be simple. There would be patents to secure, development pathways to establish, clinical trials to design. But the first crucial step had been taken, Scientific confirmation that Eleanor Shepard's Providencin was real and potentially as revolutionary as she had believed. As Noah rejoined Eliza and Marcus at the lab bench, where they were already planning the next phase of testing, he felt a profound sense of purpose that transcended his previous scientific ambitions. This wasn't just about saving his departments, funding, or advancing his career. This was about honoring a legacy of ethical science and potentially saving millions of lives. The storm that had brought him to Willow Creek Ranch had passed, but its consequences were just beginning to unfold, consequences that would ripple through modern medicine, the Morgan family's future, and Noah's own life in ways none of them could yet fully imagine. The news of their breakthrough spread rapidly through the Rosemont Research Institute, despite Noah's attempts to maintain confidentiality. Extraordinary discoveries have a way of generating their own momentum, and the unprecedented effectiveness of the fungal extract against resistant bacterial strains was simply too remarkable to contain within their small research team. Director Phillips returned from his conference in Geneva and immediately called Noah into his office. A distinguished scientist in his 60s with a reputation for both scientific brilliance and political savvy, Phillips had led the institute through increasingly challenging funding environments. "I've reviewed your preliminary reports," he said without preamble as Noah took a seat across from his imposing desk. "If these results hold up under further testing, this could be the most significant discovery in our institute's history." Noah nodded, fully aware of the implications. "The antimicrobial activity is unlike anything ever seen. The compound appears effective against all tested bacterial strains, including those with multi-drug resistance. And you found this where exactly?" Phillips asked, his gaze sharp and assessing. Here Noah proceeded carefully, remembering his commitment to the Morgan family. "On a private ranch in Montana. The owners are aware of the discovery and have been fully involved in the decision to pursue research. In fact, we've already engaged legal counsel to establish a foundation that will control intellectual property rights." Phillips raised an eyebrow. "That's unusually proactive for an initial discovery phase." "There are unique circumstances," Noah explained. "The fungal species was actually identified decades ago by a scientist named Dr. Eleanor Shepard, but her research remained private. The current ranch owners are her relatives who have preserved her discovery." "Fascinating," Phillips murmured. "And potentially complicated from an IP perspective." "We've addressed that," Noah assured him. "Jen Blackwell is handling the legal framework. The Shepard Foundation will hold the patents, with licensing arrangements that ensure ethical development and distribution." Phillips leaned back in his chair, considering. This could transform the Institute's standing in the research community, not to mention secure our funding for decades. He fixed Noah with an intent gaze. "I want to fast-track this. Assemble a larger research team. Expedite the characterization and testing process." Noah hesitated. "Sir, I promised the Morgan family we'd maintain a controlled research environment. They're concerned about premature publicity or corporate involvement before proper protections are in place." "Understandable," Phillips conceded. "But science of this magnitude doesn't remain private for long. Better to control the narrative than have it leak through informal channels." He tapped his desk decisively. "We'll expand the team modestly, just the additional expertise needed for advanced characterization. And we'll accelerate the patent filings." Though not entirely comfortable with this acceleration, Noah recognized the practical reality. Better to have Phillips as an ally than create unnecessary friction. "I'll need to update the Morgans on these developments," he said. "Of course, maintain good relations with the family. They're clearly important partners in this endeavor." Phillips rose, signaling the end of the meeting. "This is excellent work, Noah. Truly groundbreaking. Your grandfather would have been proud." The mention of his grandfather, unexpected and oddly personal coming from the usually formal director, caught Noah off guard. "Thank you, sir. That means a great deal to me." As he left the director's office, Noah felt both excitement and unease. The scientific momentum was building rapidly, perhaps more rapidly than he or the Morgan family had anticipated. He needed to call Lily immediately. But before he could reach his office, he was intercepted by Dr. Vanessa Clark, head of the Institute's Corporate Partnership Division. An elegant woman with a reputation for securing lucrative development deals, she fell into step beside him. "Noah," she greeted him warmly, "I've just heard about your Montana discovery. Remarkable work. News really did travel fast." "Thank you, Vanessa. We're still in early research phases." "Of course, but it's never too early to consider development pathways. Several of our pharmaceutical partners would be extremely interested in a novel antibiotic compound, especially one effective against resistant strains." She handed him a sleek business card. "Let's schedule a meeting to discuss potential partnerships." Noah pocketed the card with a non-committal smile. "I'll be in touch when we're further along. We have specific arrangements regarding intellectual property that will shape any development discussions." Vanessa's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. "Interesting. Well, do keep me in the loop. The commercial potential here could be extraordinary." As she walked away, Noah felt the stakes rising. The Institute's interest was natural and expected, but the speed with which corporate partnerships were being suggested concerned him. This was exactly the scenario Henry Morgan had worried about: powerful interests moving quickly to capitalize on Eleanor's discovery. Back in his lab, Noah found Eliza and Marcus engaged in animated discussion with two additional researchers who had apparently been assigned to their team: Dr. Alan Roth, a biochemist specializing in natural product characterization, and Dr. Sophia Patel, an expert in antimicrobial resistance mechanisms. "Director Phillips sent them over," Eliza explained when she saw Noah's surprised expression. "He's fast-tracking the research." Noah introduced himself to the new team members, who were clearly excited to be involved in such a promising project. Both were excellent scientists with relevant expertise, and under normal circumstances, Noah would have welcomed their addition. But he couldn't shake a growing sense of losing control over the process. "Let's get everyone up to speed," he said, deciding to make the best of the situation. "But first, I need to make a call." Stepping into his office, Noah dialed Lily's number. When she answered, he could hear the sounds of ranch activity in the background: horses nickering, machinery running, the everyday sounds of Willow Creek that he found himself missing more than expected. "Things are moving quickly here," he told her after their initial greetings. "Director Phillips has assigned additional researchers to the team and wants to accelerate the development timeline." "That sounds concerning," Lily replied, her voice tensing slightly. "Is our agreement being honored?" "Yes, the legal framework remains in place. Jim Blackwell's documents have been filed with our legal department. But the Institute is understandably excited about the potential. They're already talking about corporate partnerships." "Grandpa won't like that," Lily said. "He's very clear about maintaining control over how Eleanor's discovery is developed." "The Shepherd Foundation will still hold the patents," Noah assured her. "Any development partnerships would have to comply with the ethical guidelines we've established." There was a pause before Lily spoke again. "Noah, maybe you should come back to the ranch, just for a few days. We need to discuss these developments as a family, and it would be better in person." The suggestion caught him by surprise, partly because he hadn't expected it, and partly because of how strongly he wanted to accept. "I'd like that. Let me see if I can arrange it. We're at a point where some of the longer-term tests are running, and I could leave Eliza in charge for a few days." "Good," Lily said, sounding relieved. "When could you come?" "Let me check with the team and get back to you. Potentially by the end of this week." After ending the call, Noah rejoined the expanded research team. Despite his concerns about the accelerated timeline, He had to admit that the additional expertise was valuable. Dr. Roth had already begun advanced chemical analysis to determine the structure of the active compound, while Dr. Patel was designing experiments to elucidate its mechanism of action. The preliminary structural data is fascinating, Dr. Roth reported. This appears to be a completely novel class of compound, not a beta-lactam, not a macrolide. Not anything we've characterized before. The core structure has some similarities to certain antifungal compounds, ironically, but with unique functional groups that likely account for its antibacterial activity. Dr. Patel was equally excited. Based on the kill kinetics and the way it disrupts bacterial membranes, I believe it's targeting a fundamental component of bacterial cell structure, possibly something in the peptidoglycan synthesis pathway that hasn't been exploited by existing antibiotics. The scientific implications were extraordinary. Most new antibiotics developed in recent decades had been modifications of existing classes, with incremental improvements in effectiveness. A truly novel class with a unique mechanism of action represented the holy grail of antibiotic research, the potential to overcome existing resistance mechanisms and provide a new line of defense against evolving pathogens. Over the next few days, Noah worked intensively with the expanded team, simultaneously advancing the research and preparing for his return visit to Willow Creek Ranch. The data continued to confirm and extend their initial findings. Providencin, as they had officially named the compound, honoring Eleanor Shepard's original designation, showed remarkable stability, potent antimicrobial activity across a broad spectrum of pathogens, and no detectable toxicity to mammalian cells in preliminary testing. Director Phillips called another meeting to discuss progress, this time including the entire research team and representatives from the Institute's legal department. The patent applications have been filed, the head legal counsel reported. The Shepard Foundation is named as the primary patent holder, with the Rosemont Institute as the research partner. All very unusual, but the documentation provided by Mr. Blackwell was impeccable. Phillips nodded approvingly. And the research progress? Each team member reported on their specific area, painting a comprehensive picture of a breakthrough with enormous potential. When they finished, Phillips looked thoughtfully at Noah. You mentioned returning to Montana to consult with the Morgan family. When do you plan to go? Friday, Noah replied. I'll be gone for 5 days. Dr. Chun will lead the team in my absence. Good. While you're there, perhaps you could discuss accelerating our timeline for clinical development. With a compound this promising, there are pathways for expedited review by regulatory agencies. Noah nodded noncommittally. I'll certainly discuss next steps with them. Excellent. And Noah, remember that while we respect the Morgan family's historical connection to this discovery, the Rosemont Institute has significant resources and expertise to bring to bear on its development. It would be a disservice to public health to delay unnecessarily. The message was clear. Phillips respected the agreement with the Morgans, but was eager to move forward rapidly. Noah understood the scientific imperative. People were dying from resistant infections every day, but also recognized the importance of honoring the Morgan family's stewardship of Eleanor's legacy. Friday morning found Noah once again loading his trusted Jeep, this time with extensive research data rather than soil samples. The Montana weather forecast predicted clear conditions, a welcome change from the storm that had first brought him to Willow Creek Ranch. Eliza walked into his vehicle, reviewing final instructions for the ongoing experiments. We'll maintain the testing protocols exactly as established, she assured him. And I'll keep Director Phillips from pushing too hard while you're gone. Thanks, Eliza. I couldn't do this without you. She smiled, then added more seriously, this discovery is changing everything. Noah, not just for medicine, but for us personally. The Institute is already talking about dedicated research funding, expanded lab space. It's everything we've been working toward. I know, Noah acknowledged. But we need to do this right. Honor the source of the discovery and ensure it's developed ethically. That's as important as the science itself. Eliza studied him curiously. You've changed. Since Montana. It's more than just the discovery for you now, isn't it? Noah considered deflecting but opted for honesty with his longtime colleague. Yes, the Morgan family, their commitment to Eleanor Shepard's legacy. It's given me a different perspective. On what we do, why we do it. And Lily Morgan? Eliza asked perceptively. She's become more than just our contact person, hasn't she? Noah felt a flush of warmth that had nothing to do with the morning sun. That's complicated. Eliza smiled knowingly. Just be careful. Personal and professional entanglements can get messy, especially with stakes this high. I'll keep that in mind, Noah promised, appreciating her concern while knowing his connection with Lily had already grown beyond simple professional boundaries. The drive to Montana was different. This time, no breakdowns, no unexpected storms, just the steady progression westward across changing landscapes. Noah found himself increasingly eager to return to Willow Creek Ranch, to see the Morgan family again, to stand once more in Coleman Valley where Eleanor Shepard had made her remarkable discovery decades earlier. When he finally turned onto the ranch road 3 days later, the familiar vista of rolling pastures and distant mountains stirred something in him that felt surprisingly like coming home. Lily was waiting on the porch, her face lighting up with a smile that quickened Noah's pulse. "Welcome back," she said as he climbed out of the Jeep. "Rusty made it without breaking down this time?" "Not even a hiccup," Noah confirmed, returning her smile. "How is everyone? Eager to hear your news. Grandpa's been pacing all morning." Inside, Henry and Daniel greeted him warmly, the tension of his first visit replaced by the camaraderie of shared purpose. Jim Blackwell had also driven up from Helena for this meeting, underscoring its importance. Over dinner, Noah shared the extraordinary research results, showing them photographs of the bacterial cultures, chemical analysis data, and preliminary toxicology reports. The scientific details might have been beyond their expertise, but the implications were clear to everyone at the table. "So Eleanor was right," Henry said softly, looking at the images of bacteria unable to grow anywhere near the Providence Inn samples. "All these years, we've been protecting something truly revolutionary." "She was more than right," Noah confirmed. "Based on our testing, Providence Inn is potentially the most significant antibiotic discovery since, well, penicillin itself. It's effective against every bacterial strain we've tested, including those resistant to multiple existing antibiotics. And the mechanism appears to be novel, targeting a bacterial vulnerability that hasn't been exploited before." Jim Blackwell leaned forward. "And the patents? Are they secure?" "Yes," Noah assured him. "The Shepard Foundation is named as the primary patent holder, with all the ethical development provisions we discussed. The Rosemont Institute is acknowledged as the research partner." "Good," Henry nodded approvingly. Eleanor would be satisfied with that arrangement. "There is one issue we need to discuss," Noah continued. "Director Phillips is eager to accelerate the development timeline. He sees the potential public health impact and wants to move quickly toward clinical trials." Daniel, ever practical, asked the key question. "What would that mean in practical terms?" "Expanded research teams, more resources dedicated to characterization and production methods, earlier engagement with regulatory agencies, and potentially partnerships with pharmaceutical companies for clinical development." Henry's expression darkened at the mention of pharmaceutical companies. That's precisely what Eleanor was concerned about, corporate interests controlling her discovery. "The legal framework protects against that," Jim reminded him. "Any development partners would have to comply with the ethical guidelines established by the Foundation, including provisions for equitable global access." "On paper," Henry conceded. "But we all know how these things can work in practice. once the corporate lawyers get involved. Noah understood Henry's concerns. That's partly why I wanted to have this discussion in person. We're at a critical juncture where we need to balance two important considerations: honoring Eleanor's wishes regarding ethical development, and ensuring this breakthrough reaches the people who need it as quickly as possible. Lily, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. Every day we delay, people die from infections that Providence might treat. We have to consider that moral dimension as well. Henry looked at his granddaughter thoughtfully. Eleanor was a healer at heart. Her concern was never about delaying treatment for those who needed it. It was about preventing her discovery from being weaponized or exploited. The world has changed since Eleanor's time, Jim observed. There are now international frameworks for ethical drug development, non-profit pharmaceutical initiatives, and greater transparency in clinical research. We can build on those to create additional safeguards. The discussion continued late into the evening, weighing ethical considerations against practical realities, historical promises against current needs. Noah was struck by the Morgan family's thoughtful approach. They weren't simply resistant to change or protective of their control, but genuinely committed to honoring both the letter and spirit of their promise to Eleanor. By the time they retired for the night, they had reached a tentative consensus. Development would proceed with accelerated timelines, but with enhanced oversight from the Shepherd Foundation. Any corporate partnerships would require unanimous approval from the Foundation's board, which would include Henry, Daniel, and Lily, along with Noah as the scientific representative. The next morning, Noah woke early and found himself drawn to the ranch's stables. Several horses nickered in greeting as he entered, including the chestnut gelding Copper he had ridden to Coleman Valley. "They remember you," Lily's voice came from behind him. She was dressed for riding, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Want to join me for a morning ride? I thought you might like to see Coleman Valley again, now that you understand its significance." Noah accepted gratefully, and soon they were riding across the dew-dampened pastures as the sun crested the eastern hills. The morning was crisp and clear, the landscape painted in the golden light of early autumn. They rode mostly in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the momentous changes unfolding around Eleanor's discovery. As they reached the ridge overlooking Coleman Valley, they stopped to take in the view. From this vantage point, Noah could see the distinctive patterns of fungal growth spread across the valley floor, visible to his now educated eye as slightly different colorations in the vegetation. "It's remarkable," he said softly. "From up here, you can actually see the distribution patterns. The fungus grows most densely near the stream and in those concentric rings we noticed before." Lily nodded. "I've seen these patterns my whole life without understanding their significance. Now I can't look at our land the same way." "How does it feel?" Noah asked. "Knowing that your family has been guardians of something so important all these years?" She considered the question thoughtfully, proud, humbled, a little overwhelmed by the responsibility, but mostly, "I feel purposeful, like everything we've done. The breeding program, maintaining the ranch exactly as it is, has been leading to this moment when the discovery could finally do what it was meant to do: heal people." They dismounted and led their horses to a grassy spot overlooking the valley. Sitting side by side, they continued their conversation about legacy, purpose, and the unexpected paths that life sometimes takes. "My grandfather believed that every person has a unique contribution to make," Noah shared. "Some discovery or creation or service that only they can offer to the world. I've spent my career searching for mine, never quite sure if I was on the right track." "And now?" Lily asked. "Now I feel like I've stumbled into something larger than myself, a story that began decades before I was born and will continue long after I'm gone. My part was finding it at the right moment, helping bridge past and future." Lily smiled. "Eleanor used to tell my grandfather that scientific discoveries aren't really inventions. They're revelations of patterns that were always there, waiting to be recognized. The fungus was always here, the antibiotic compound always working. It just needed the right person to understand its significance. The right people, Noah corrected gently. Your family's stewardship was as essential as Eleanor's original discovery or my team's current research. As they sat in the morning sunlight, looking out over the valley that had harbored such an extraordinary secret for so long, Noah felt a profound sense of connection to this place, to the Morgan family, and especially to Lily, whose quiet strength and ethical clarity had guided their path forward. When they finally rode back to the ranch, they found Henry on the porch with a strange expression on his weathered face. He held a tablet computer in his hands, an unusual sight for the typically low-tech rancher. "What is it, Grandpa?" Lily asked, immediately sensing something was wrong. "Jim sent this," Henry said, handing the tablet to Noah. "It's from a financial news website. Someone leaked information about Providencin." Noah quickly scanned the article, his concern growing. With each paragraph, the piece outlined the discovery of a revolutionary new antibiotic at the Rosemont Institute, citing unnamed sources familiar with the research. While it didn't mention the Morgan family or Willow Creek Ranch specifically, it referenced a privately held biological resource and complex intellectual property arrangements. "This is exactly what we were worried about," Henry said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Once word gets out, every pharmaceutical company and biotech investor will be circling like vultures." Noah felt a knot forming in his stomach. "I need to call Director Phillips immediately. This leak didn't come from our core research team, but someone at the Institute clearly violated confidentiality." The call to Phillips was tense. The director expressed appropriate concern about the leak, but seemed more focused on damage control than identifying the source. "Perhaps this is a blessing in disguise," Phillips suggested. "Now that word is out, we can shape the narrative proactively, issue an official statement, perhaps even accelerate our development partnerships." "That's not how we agreed to proceed," Noah reminded him firmly. "The Morgan family and the Shepherd Foundation need to approve any public disclosures or partnership discussions." There was a slight pause before Phillips responded. "Of course, I'm merely suggesting we adapt to changing circumstances. The scientific community will be clamoring for information now, and potential development partners will be reaching out. Better to respond strategically than reactively." After ending the call, Noah rejoined the Morgans with a troubled expression. "Phillips wants to shape the narrative now that the information is out. I'm concerned he may see this leak as an opportunity to bypass some of our agreed processes." Jim Blackwell, who had driven back to the ranch as soon as he saw the article, offered a pragmatic assessment. "From a legal perspective, the patents and the foundation structure protect your essential interests. But it would be naive to think this won't accelerate everything: media attention, corporate interest, development timelines." Daniel, who had been quietly thoughtful throughout the discussion, suddenly spoke up. "Maybe we need to change our approach entirely." All eyes turned to him, and he continued with growing conviction. "We've been trying to work within the traditional pharmaceutical development model, just with added ethical safeguards. But what if that's not enough? What if we need to fundamentally rethink how this discovery reaches the world?" "What are you suggesting?" Henry asked his grandson. "Open source the basic research. Make the fundamental scientific knowledge about Providencin freely available to researchers worldwide. Keep the patents for specific medical applications, but create a new model for development and distribution." It was a radical suggestion, completely counter to conventional pharmaceutical development approaches. But as Noah considered it, he realized it aligned perfectly with Eleanor Shepherd's original concerns. By making the core scientific knowledge publicly available, they would prevent any single entity from monopolizing the discovery. "That would change everything," Noah said slowly, his mind racing with the implications. It would accelerate research globally, potentially leading to multiple applications beyond what any single company might pursue. But it would also reduce the commercial value of the patents. Good, Henry said firmly. Eleanor never wanted her discovery to be primarily a commercial asset. She wanted it to heal people, regardless of their ability to pay or their country of origin. Lily was nodding enthusiastically. It's perfect. We honor Eleanor's wishes while adapting to modern realities. And we take control of the narrative away from whoever leaked the information. Jim Blackwell looked both concerned and intrigued. It's unconventional, but legally feasible. We would need to carefully structure what information is released openly versus what applications remain protected by patents. And the Rosemont Institute would need to agree. That's my department, Noah said with newfound determination. I need to return to Boston immediately and make our case directly to the board of directors, not just Phillips. This is too important to leave to standard protocols. As they formulated their plan, Noah felt a surge of purpose unlike anything in his previous scientific career. This wasn't just about research anymore. It was about transforming how a major medical breakthrough reached the world, potentially creating a new model for ethical scientific development in the process. That evening, as he prepared for his earlier-than-planned departure the next morning, Lily joined him on the porch. The sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, a fitting backdrop for the momentous decisions they had made. "You know this won't be easy," she said quietly. "You'll be challenging powerful interests, established systems." "I know," Noah acknowledged. "But sometimes the right path isn't the easy one." Lily's hand found his in the gathering darkness. "Eleanor would be proud of what you're doing, of what we're all doing together." As they stood there, watching the last light fade from the Montana sky, Noah realized that his chance breakdown during a thunderstorm had led to far more than a scientific discovery. It had led him to a cause worth fighting for, principles worth upholding, and people worth standing beside. A family whose courage in protecting Eleanor's legacy had inspired his own. The path ahead would be challenging, the forces of conventional pharmaceutical development powerful and entrenched. But together, the Morgan family with their generations of ethical stewardship, and Noah with his scientific expertise and growing conviction, they had a chance to transform not just the treatment of bacterial infections, but the very model of how life-saving discoveries reached those who needed them most. The fungus that had kept Willow Creek horses healthy for generations might soon help heal millions of people worldwide. And in the process, it might heal something else as well, the often broken connection between scientific discovery and ethical application, between knowledge and wisdom, between what could be done and what should be done. As Noah and Lily stood together in the deepening twilight, the ranch quiet around them save for the occasional soft nickering of horses, the moment felt like both an ending and a beginning, the culmination of Eleanor Shepard's remarkable journey and the first step in their own. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.